Internal subway tunnel that moment.
A local train roars by, filling the screen. When it passes, we see Tiptree with his suitcase, walking along the express tracks at the far wall of the tunnel, more frightened with each step. It's dark and eerie down here in the tunnels. The only illumination comes from the dim lantern spaced at 50-foot intervals. He sees the light of an express train behind him, and quickly switches to the local tracks. The train rumbles past with a deafening blare, and the car lights briefly illuminate his surroundings. Tiptree glances over the inside wall of the tunnel where he sees, huddled in an alcove just off the tracks, a small gathering of homeless people. They've set up camp down here in the tunnels, away from the elements. Surrounded by bags full of old clothes, dining on canned food and cheap wine, they stare curiously at the well-heeled stranger with a suitcase who's invaded their domain. Tiptree eyes them fearfully and picks up his pace, hastening down the tunnel. The homeless make no move to follow, with one exception. A kid, 13 or 14, in a ratty topcoat, climbs down onto the tracks and watches inquisitively as Tiptree vanishes into the shadows. His face is familiar. It's Dick, the boy vigilante from the park.
Internal tunnel farther down tracks a moment later.
In this stretch of the tunnel, the lanterns don't seem to be working, and the Mynar is completely invisible. When he comes to the forks in the tracks, he has to wait for the sound of the bird's shrill voice to guide him.
Follow me.
Tiptree stumbles ahead blindly in the darkness. He trips on the tracks and drops the suitcase. As he's getting to his feet, a flashlight shines directly in his face. Stop there. The Mynar bird flutters through the beam of light and perches on the shoulder of the unseen figure. Tiptree cowers and squints, trying to make him out, but the figure who stands before him is shielding his face with an open umbrella.
I've cooperated. I've done everything you said.
Open the case.
Tiptree lifts the lid, revealing 2 ravens in the suitcase. A cackling laugh echoes in the darkness.
2 ravens?
The other one is Bruce Wayne's. He doesn't know anything about this. You've got what you want. There's no need to...
Thank you, Mr. Tiptree. You may go.
Tiptree stands. He backs away from the suitcase warily.
My family, you won't?
We'll certainly take your unexpected generosity into consideration.
We? You're not Batman.
No, I'm his brother-in-law, Birdman. Now move out.
Internal tunnel high angle that moment.
Tiptree marches slowly down the track, silhouetted in a flashlight beam. The beam shifts slightly as the Penguin moves towards the suitcase and sets the light down, and we catch the sight of the Catwoman perched on a steel cross-girder above the rails, her chrome steel talons glinting as she waits for Tiptree to pass underneath.
Internal tunnel on Tiptree.
Looks increasingly twitchy as he approaches the cross-girder. He slips a hand into his pocket of his topcoat, whirls suddenly, and brings up his .38, firing 3 quick shots at the Penguin. The shots ricochet loudly off the umbrella, which happens to be bulletproof. The Penguin lifts his body, fire spits out the shaft, and Tiptree staggers backward. Shot in the chest. He spins into a steel upright and topples face forward onto the electrified 3rd rail, frying himself in a shower of sparks. The smoke is still clearing when the Catwoman drops down to the track. The Penguin rushes to her side to check Tiptree for the signs of life.
That idiot. Another 6 feet.
So sorry to spoil your fun. He brought 2 ravens. Now, we've got a complete set.
What?
Yeah, they're in the suitcase.
An awful rumbling fills the tunnel. They see the lights of a train approaching on the center track, the same one they're standing on. The one Tiptree's body is slumped across. The Penguin's first impulse is to run back towards the inner track, where the ravens lie, but the Catwoman is trying to drag Tiptree out of the train's path.
Give me a hand.
They pull the corpse onto the outer express track just as the train arrives. They stand against the outer wall, waiting for the train to pass, and when it does, they see Dick, the boy vigilante, standing on the inner track, directly across from them. Holding the suitcase, the kid takes off like a shot. The Catwoman and the Penguin exchange looks of utter disbelief and bolt after Dick.
Internal tunnel on Dick.
The bulky suitcase is slowing his progress. He looks back over his shoulder. Although the stubby-legged Penguin has fallen well behind, the Catwoman is gaining fast.
Page 101 missing from hard copy. Internal tunnel on Dick.
Watching in the light from the train as 2 costumed figures grapple in the distance. He races back towards the scene of the melee.
Internal tunnel outer express track that moment.
Where Batman and the Catwoman are trading punches, blow for blow. He knocks her off her feet with vicious right hook, and then she sprawls on the track, dazed and bleeding. She lifts a hand, no mass. He looks back towards the suitcase on the center track. Before he can make a move towards it, he spots another train approaching on the outer tracks, right on the heels of the last one. He crouches to pull the Catwoman's limp frame out of the path, but as he does so, a horn blares, and the second train comes barreling down the center track from the opposite direction. Now he's got trains approaching on either side, and there's no place to go. The Catwoman is groggily getting to her feet. He lunges at her, thrusts her back towards the alcove in the outer tunnel wall.
Internal tunnel on Dick that moment.
The outer train is already speeding past, obscuring Batman and the Catwoman from view. The center train is bearing down fast. A split second before it arrives, Dick Hand snatches the suitcase out of its path, and he tumbles to safety on the innermost local track. He stands and watches as two trains pass in opposite direction. He doesn't know if Batman is alive or dead.
Internal alcove that moment.
Batman and Catwoman are flattened in a tiny alcove, and there's not 2 inches of breathing space between them and the passing train. She's come around now, and she's flailing and clawing at him, trying to push him out. Her hand closes around his utility belt. As they struggle, she hits the trigger of a small gas cylinder. It's Bruce's hydraulic Batwing device, the one that saved him when he fell off the roof. But this time the results are altogether different. He gasps in horror as the wings of his cape stiffen and inflate, forcing him away from the wall of the tunnel. His outer wing strikes the train, flapping wildly against the passing cars, snagging finally on the railing of the rearmost car, and Batman is suddenly ripped out of the alcove, dragged off down the tracks by the passing train.
Internal tunnel innermost track on Dick.
He's still there with the suitcase, waiting apprehensively to see if what becomes of Batman. Finally, the center train passes, and he sees Catwoman standing alone in the alcove, smiling at him, advancing menacingly. Dick turns to run. A gunshot rings out, and the last thing he sees as he slumps to the tracks is a whiff of smoke, pluming from the shaft of Penguin's umbrella. The Penguin's panting, soaked in sweat. The Catwoman snatches up the suitcase and rushes over to join him. She peers off into the tunnels after Batman, exhilarated.
God, did you see him? Isn't he hot?
Ain't you got anything else to think about?
No pain, no gain. Suck it up. We're not out of here yet.
She sprints off down the tracks. Squawking, he waddles along behind her, as fast as his fat little legs will carry him. As they vanish into the darkness, Dick is lying unconscious on the tracks, bleeding heavily from his shoulder wound. In the maze of tunnels, the ragged black figure of Batman, as he staggers forth from the shadows, dazed and bloody. He scans the tunnel, finding no trace of his enemies, and then his gaze falls on Dick. He limps over and kneels at the boy's side, cradling his head protectively, staring helplessly into the blackness all around him.
Dissolve to external Gotham City skyline night.
The stark outline of the city, bathed in moonlight. We see a glowing ornamental dome of the city hall.
Internal City Hall that moment night.
A pentagonal balcony guards the interior of the dome. We tilt down to the ground level. 2 aged security guards lie sprawled at odd angles on the marbled floor, fatally shot. The Penguin closes his gun umbrella and waddles across the atrium of the City Hall, past the statue of the Blind Justice, to a point directly under the dome. There, encased in a plexiglass, is a scale model of Gotham City, circa 1885. When City Hall was erected, he shouts up,
Let's do it.
Internal City Hall balcony under dome that moment.
The Catwoman, Frick and Frack are already up on the balcony. Lining its periphery are various display cases of historical interest, and positioned along the wall of each of the Pentagon are 5 arched niches, each one containing a bronze bust, the patriarchs of the Gotham 5 families. The Catwoman and company go to work quickly. She removes the 5 Raynans from the gunny sack as Frick and Frack work their way around the balcony, yanking the bust from the recessed bases. She follows along behind them, replacing each bust with a raven. When they're done, the Penguin yells up,
Now, give each raven a quarter turn.
His pals in the dome oblige, twisting each raven in the recessed socket in quick succession.
Internal City Hall atrium on Penguin.
The moment of maximum tension. He stands there, frothing in the mouth with anticipation. Seconds tick off, and nothing happens.
What happens now?
I don't know. That's all.
He looks round expectantly as the others peer down at him from above. He really doesn't know what's supposed to happen next. Suspecting the worst, he throws his umbrella to the floor and begins stomping around in rage, sputtering, flapping his arms like wings.
We've been tricked. It's a hoax. It's a...
He shuts up suddenly at the sound of a loud chunk. Somewhere behind him, ancient gears are beginning to grind. He spins and stares at the scale model of Gotham in a plexiglass case. The City Model Hall is trembling slightly. As he watches, the dome of the miniature City Hall, in the dead centre of the model, pops off on a hinge. A metal strongbox rises into view.
Internal dome on balcony that moment.
The Catwoman, Frick and Frack stare down at the little metal box. The Penguin is already clambering atop of the plexiglass case of the model, smashing at it with his umbrella, trying to get out the box.
That's the treasure?
No, it's a map.
She affixes a rope to the balcony railing and climbs over.
Internal City Hall atrium on Penguin.
The plexiglass case finally shatters, and the Penguin falls through, landing atop of Gotham City. He snatches the strong box and gets to his feet. Bestriding the city like a colossus, he's climbing down off the tabletop when the Catwoman, on her rope, touches down behind him. He hunkers down on the floor and knocks the rusted padlock off the box. He opens it and stares greedily at its contents, a map and a bunch of old, crumbling photos. The Catwoman creeps over to his side.
Bruce Wayne? So does you know a thing about the treasure, huh? Look at this. It's right under Wayne Manor. It's been there all along.
Now the Catwoman snatches at the photos. They show progressively closer views of ancient gnarls, stalactites, an odd distinctive subterranean rock formation.
Looks like some kind of cave.
Internal Wayne Manor guest bedroom day.
Here we see Dick. He lies unconscious in a big, soft, frilly bed. A woman's hand wipes his feverish brow with a damp cloth. He moans slightly. His eyes snap open suddenly. He sits bolt upright with a yelp.
No, don't try to get up. You're hurt.
He pushes her aside and climbs out of bed anyway. His shoulder is bandaged. His arm is in a sling. The pajamas he's wearing are 3 sizes too large. He paces about, staring at unfamiliar surroundings.
It's all right. You're safe. You can stay here as long as you need to.
I don't belong here. And you can't keep me here.
Vaguely unnerved, he goes to the window, pulls back the shades, and looks out at the grounds.
It's Dick, isn't it? Or do you prefer Richard?
He stares at her as if she's nuts. Vicki opens the closet door. All of his ratty things are hanging inside, including the red and green gymnast suit, with an R insignia on the breast.
R, for Richard, right? See, all your things are here. What is it, some kind of gymnast outfit?
It's none of your business. What is this? Some kind of home?
No, not that kind. There's a swimming pool, tennis court. You can have anything you want.
Tennis court? Lady, you're rich. How the hell would you know what I want?
Vicki tries to lay a soothing arm on his shoulder. He bats it away, pushes her aside, and turns towards the door in agitation.
Well, I'm not staying. You can't make me.
And sees Bruce standing in the doorway looking at him.
I can make you.
Dick freezes, as if Bruce's mere presence has mesmerized him. The hint of a smile plays across his face. Oh, I'm in Batman's house.
Come on. Want to go at it? Look, kid. Like it or not, you're my guest. And long as you're here, you might as well enjoy it.
Alfred appears with a tray of hot food and sets it down on a bedside table. Dick edges towards it and sits down. He waits for Alfred to leave and then tucks in hungrily, eyeing Bruce all the while.
Will you two be okay in here?
Vicki nods yes. Bruce backs out of the room.
Internal Wayne Manor outside guest room day.
Bruce pulls the door shut. Alfred follows him down the hall.
With all due respect, what do you propose to do with him, sir? Keep him in the room for the rest of his life?
I don't know, Alfred. I've got other stuff to worry about.
The child is hurt, sir. At the very least, we should attempt to locate his parents.
He hasn't got any parents.
How do you know that, sir?
Bruce turns and fixes Alfred with a steely gaze.
I know.
The phone rings as Bruce starts down the long stairway. Alfred picks up the hallway extension. He covers the mouthpiece.
Sir, it's Miss Kyle.
Bruce rushes back upstairs to take the call.
Internal Penguin's lair that moment day.
Arctic birds chirping all round in the penguin pool room. A snow owl struts across the penguin's desk as Selina makes a phone call, with the penguin, Frick and Frack hovering over her.
Well, tall, dark, and handsome. Are we still on for tonight?
Internal Wayne Manor on Bruce.
He covers the receiver and stares intensely at Alfred.
Dissolve to. Internal Wayne Manor front parlor night.
Christmas carols playing. Vicky's got Dick helping her trim the tree.
Internal Bruce's bedroom night.
Bruce is getting dressed for his date with Selina.
Is this necessary, sir? After all, it is Christmas Eve.
Bruce reaches for his utility belt. He empties the contents of one packet onto the dresser. A dozen tiny red glassine capsules. He scoops up a handful of the capsules and deposits them in his jacket pocket.
Stuff will knock out a moose, much less a cat.
I don't like to see you going out on a date unprotected, sir.
She'll be ready for Batman, but not for me. It's the only way, Alfred. I've got to take her out tonight.
Internal entry hall 5 minutes later.
Dick watches from the front parlour as Vicki meets Bruce at the bottom of the stairs. The two of them exchange a few brief words. He embraces her, strokes her hair gently, then glumly sets his jaw and moves off toward the front door. Vicki re-enters the parlour, trying to force an expression of cheer, as Dick turns discreetly away. This is one weird household he's landed in.
Internal Selina's loft night.
Soft music plays in the background as Selina preens in front of a vanity, doing her eye makeup, taking great pleasure in her own reflection. She's looking especially sultry tonight in a glittery low-cut gown. She lowers one shoulder strap and strikes a pose in the mirror. Better. She runs her hand through her hair for that recently ravaged look. The doorbell rings, and by the time Selina crosses over to answer it, she's lowered another strap as well, which means she has to hold up the top of her dress with one hand. Bruce finds himself dumbstruck as she lets him in. She pulls up both straps as she greets him nonchalantly.
You're early. I'm afraid I'm not quite dressed.
Bruce enters and takes a longer look around. It's a big open loft, only partly furnished, filled with Egyptian artifacts. The walls feature modern paintings with cat motifs. The finished section is dominated by a huge bed on a raised platform. 3 or 4 cats are walking around it, yowling at Bruce. Selina chuckles as he scopes it all out.
If you're looking for my bondage gear, it's at the cleaners.
Christmas Eve. No tree?
No presents. I've been a bad girl this year.
Bruce takes a seat on the sofa while Selina goes to a nearby wet bar.
I'm surprised you kept this date. I thought you would have lost interest by now.
What makes you say that?
You've got what you want, don't you?
I do now. We've had this date for a long, long time.
With that, she sets the drinks down on the table and moves in to kiss him, a long, slow, wet kiss. But Bruce seems strangely unresponsive. She breaks free and gives him a funny look.
How much is it going to cost me?
What?
To get the ravens back.
He watches her closely for a reaction. Selina's shocked, but she conceals it well, chuckling in apparent confusion.
You're the oddest man I've ever met. Let's talk later, Bruce. I've got kind of a short fuse.
Bruce tenses slightly as she kisses him again, leaving a crimson lipstick smear on his cheek. She works her way downward, kissing him around his neck and throat. His hand reaches into his jacket pocket. He withdraws a tiny glassine capsule. He jerks back suddenly, pushes her away. His free hand goes to his neck, where a thin trickle of blood is oozing from between 2 bright red lipstick lips. She's bitten him. Now she shushes him, reaches over to the tiny wound, and massages it gently with one hand.
Did I hurt you? Just relax. You'll start to enjoy it.
Bruce pulls away again. His eyes are strangely glazed. He tries to speak, but his tongue feels thick and swollen.
Bruce, you look faint. It must be the cats.
Bruce stands suddenly. It's as if he's been mired in a slow-mo nightmare. His legs give way beneath him and he topples to the floor. Inert, his fingers go slack and the capsule rolls out. He tries to reach into his pocket, but his arm won't seem to work. Selina's cat, Hecate, strolls across from his prostrate form, purring and stretching. From Bruce's POV, a worm's eye view, Selina looms over him, with a predatory smile on her face, shifting in and out of focus.
What did you do?
She runs a finger across her lips and holds it up, bright red.
I guess I've gotten under your skin.
Back to scene on Bruce.
His hand goes to the bite on his neck, and he realizes Selina's lipstick is spiked with a fast-acting paralytic drug. He writhes helplessly on the carpet, his whole body gradually going slack. The Penguin, Frick, and Frack stroll through the doorway and stand over him, all laughing.
Dissolve to External Wayne Manor night.
A county sheriff's car cruises past the manor, right on schedule.
Internal Wayne Manor parlor night.
Alfred on the telephone, checking in with the county sheriff's boys.
Everything's fine, thank you. We'll talk again in an hour.
Behind him, Vicki is waiting up for Bruce. She's curled up on the sofa, reading a book, throwing the occasional anxious glance at the big grandfather clock, which strikes 11 o'clock.
Internal Wayne Manor guest bedroom night.
Dick opens the bedroom door and peeks down the hall. He's got all his belongings tied up in a bundle on the bed. He opens the window and throws the bundle outside. There's a nice strong tree branch some 10 or 12 feet from the window, just close enough that he should be able to make it. He climbs up on the windowsill, crouches and springs.
Internal car outside that moment night.
A car full of trouble. Selina, wearing a fur coat over her Catwoman garb at the wheel. The Penguin riding shotgun, and Frick in the back, next to Bruce, who's semi-conscious and stone limp. The car idles outside the wrought iron gates of Wayne Manor.
Trey's mad cad.
Frick digs in Bruce's pockets and finds a bunch of red capsules.
Look at this. He's a pillhead.
Now Frick finds a mag-striped card and inserts it into the electronic device on the edge of the drive. The gates magically part. There's a large van just behind the car, driven by Frack and carrying 2 random goons. Both vehicles pull in before the gate slides shut.
Internal Wayne Manor a moment later.
Vicki hears a signal from the security panel in the kitchen announcing what should be Bruce's arrival. She heaves a huge sigh of relief and then rushes to the door and flings it open. She sees Bruce standing there and her face lights up.
Oh, am I glad to.
To her horror, Bruce topples forward and lands on the floor, flat as a board. Vicki shrieks as the Penguin enters, throwing his arms wide.
Merry Christmas.
External Wayne Manor that moment night.
Dick has shimmied down to a lower branch. He's let go and drops to the snow. Wincing, his shoulder wound is bleeding again. As he grabs his bundle, he hears raucous laughter coming from around the house. He races over to peer around the corner. He sees 2 cars out front. He sees the last of the goon squad barging in through the front door.
Internal Wayne Manor entry that moment.
Vicki shrieking and struggling as she stares down at Bruce.
What did you do to him?
Selina gives her a catty little smile.
First time jitters, I guess. Everything was going so great, and then he just went limp as a noodle.
Internal Wayne Manor on stairway.
Drawn by the commotion, Alfred rushes down the stairs to the entry hall, pulling on a robe around him. Freezes in his tracks when he sees Frick dragging Vicki into the front parlour, holding a gun to her head.
You would be the butler. So why don't you come down here and attend to your guests?
Alfred hesitates, until the Penguin pulls a gun on him. He marches down the stairs slowly, pausing by Bruce's prostrate form.
Mr. Wayne, she...
You know how it is. Some guys, they can't just hold their eggnog.
Internal front parlour a moment later.
Penguin marches Alfred in where the rest of the gangs are already assembled. Frick throws Vicki down roughly onto the sofa just next to the Christmas tree, while the goons drag Bruce inside.
I should explain the occasion of our visit. There's a treasure underneath this house, and I don't plan to leave until you tell me how to find it. Now who's gonna talk? Miss Vale?
I don't know what you're talking about.
The cave under the house. How do I get there?
The Penguin gestures. Frick holds a gun to her head.
I don't know, I swear, I would tell you.
Then maybe you'd like to tell me.
You're no more than a common thief.
Wrong, you old idiot. I happen to be a very uncommon feat. You are gonna tell me, or does Miss Vale get an early Christmas present this year?
Frick cocks the gun. Vicki stares in angst at Alfred, who scans the room, weighing his options. Trembling, he shuts his eyes.
I don't know.
Then go ahead, Mr. Frick. Decorate this tree now.
Frick's fingers tighten on the trigger. Vicki winces. Alfred starts to blurt something out, but a split second before he can speak.
Wait, we don't know how to get down there yet. We may need her when Bruce wakes up.
The Penguin sighs and waves Frick off. Alfred and Vicki heave simultaneous sighs of relief. He throws her a shamefaced look, but she gives him a tiny nod of acknowledgement. You made the right play.
Besides, I want this one for myself. So pretty. I'm going to give her a brand new face for Christmas.
The Penguin throws a look at Bruce, who is still out cold on the floor. He turns to Frick and Frack.
Why don't you two tie up our host?
Alfred sits beside Vicki while Selina wanders off to tour the premises. Frick and Frack, meanwhile, drag Bruce into the back parlour, which opens off the room they're in.
Internal back parlour that moment.
They dump Bruce face down on the sofa, then rip the telephone cords from around the baseboard and use them to bind his hands and feet.
Internal front parlour on Mr. Boniface.
Still holding his gun on Vicki and Alfred, he wanders around the room, admiring the various furnishings and expensive objects.
It's all so plush and tasteful, isn't it? Just the sort of setting in which I've always imagined myself.
Alfred, on the sofa, can't resist letting out a snort of disgust.
I see. You think I'm vulgar. You think I'm... nouveau?
I think you're a dirty little man with a...
The Penguin silences him by sweeping one arm across the tabletop, sending a bunch of priceless china figures crashing to the floor. He points at Alfred as Frick and Frack reappear.
See, boys, that's old money talking. After a while, they actually start to believe they've earned all this. I don't mind. Someday I'll be old money too. And when that statute of limitations runs out...
Hey, guess what I just found?
Face full of anticipation, he turns just in time to see Selina returning from the kitchen with a big silver tray of
Christmas cookies.
The Penguin is crestfallen, but that doesn't stop him from cramming a handful of cookies down his gullet. Selina graciously serves Vicki and Alfred, who munch away with limited enthusiasm.
Let's spread out, see what we can find. You two keep an eye on our friends here. Give me a yell the minute the Wayne comes to.
Frick and Frack post themselves at the doors to the front parlour. Selina, the Penguin, and the goons fan out through the house. Camera tracks with them as they move past Bruce, and in a quick close-up we see his eyes open, his hands struggling against his bonds. We get quick glimpses of the intruders enacting their depredations as they search for the entrance to the cave. Selina and the Penguin are flinging open doors, moving clocks, looking for secret panels as they go. They systematically tear apart the house, smashing Bruce's possessions, ripping paintings out of frames, etc. Meanwhile, the two goons are outside, prowling around the grounds, looking for an exterior entrance, and back in the parlour, Frick and Frack are keeping their guns trained on Alfred and Vicki.
Internal Wayne Manor corridor off kitchen night.
Frick and Frack start at the sound of a security alarm blaring from the kitchen. Vicki looks at Alfred.
Better check it out.
Frick stays behind as Frack rushes out into the entryway and down a long hall into the kitchen. He tosses a glance back at Vicki and Alfred, then steps out into the entryway himself.
What is it? What's going on?
Vicki and Alfred look into the back parlour. Dick Grayson has sneaked in behind the sofa and he's busy sawing away at Bruce's bonds with a letter opener. Both of them stiffen simultaneously. If Frick steps back inside, he'll have a clear view of Dick and Bruce.
Internal kitchen that moment.
Frick has opened a panel on the kitchen wall, revealing the security system from which the alarm emanates. A red light is blinking, indicating Dick's break-in. Frack throws the switch frantically, trying to kill the sound. He succeeds and shouts,
"Some kind of security system!"
Internal back parlour that moment.
Dick's gotten Bruce free, but Bruce, still under the effects of the drug, isn't much use. He tries to get off the sofa and crumbles in a heap.
Can you move, man?
Library. Got to get me to the library.
He slings an arm around Bruce and drags him to a door opening onto the hallway. They're just about to step outside when Frack comes marching back on his way from the kitchen.
Internal front parlour on Vicki and Alf.
Faces racked with utter desperate tension as they watch the situation develop.
Internal entry hall that moment.
Frick and Frack conferring, ignoring Vicki and Alfred for a moment, but now the Penguin is waddling in from the hallway.
What is that ungodly racket?
Security alarm! It went off in the kitchen!
My God. Is somebody in there?
He struts over to huddle with his cronies. Bruce and Dick are still poised in the doorway. It looks bad.
Internal front parlour that moment.
Alfred looks at Bruce and Dick and then at Frick and Frack, bickering with the Penguin in the entry. He pats Vicki's knee, gestures for her to keep her seat, and lunges at Frick, making a play for his gun. A moment of confusion ensues, but giving Dick and Bruce just enough time to dart into the hallway, duck around a corner, and vanish. But Alfred is a frail old gent, and he can't keep it up for long. A blow to the face sends him sprawling to the floor. Frick instinctively pulls the trigger and shoots him at point-blank range. Vicki rushes into the hallway, screaming, crying.
Internal library that moment.
The room's a mess. Books are all over the floor. The groggy Bruce props himself up against his desk. He manages to pull the bottom drawer open, gropes frantically for the secret switch. He's crying.
Alfred.
I'll go back.
Can't get down there without you.
Dick turns. To his amazement, the sectional bookcase is swinging open, revealing the secret passage to the back cave.
Internal entry hall front parlour that moment.
We will all be pleased to know that Alfred has only suffered a superficial wound to the arm. Vicki is on her knees beside him. The Penguin is watching them with utter contempt.
What an extraordinarily stupid thing to do.
Shut up. Help me with him.
The Penguin rolls his eyes and orders Frick and Frack to give Vicki a hand without her. They carry him into the parlour, lay him out on a sofa. Vicki reaches into a purse for a handkerchief and begins binding his wound as the Penguin pulls Frack aside.
You and I had better check the ground floor and see what's going on. Mr. Frick, do you think you'll be able to manage this pair?
Yes, sir.
Good. That does relieve my mind.
He turns, glances into the back parlour and sees a pile of cut cords on the love seat. The blood drains out of his face.
Where's Wayne?
Internal Batcave that moment.
Dick has just entered another world and he's looking around him in unalloyed amazement. Bruce is fumbling with a packet on the spare utility belt. He shakes out a fistful of pills and swallows them dry. Then he goes to his bank of monitors and starts flipping switches. They blink on one by one. Dick moves up behind Bruce and looks on dazzled.
Insert monitor.
The screen shows the Penguin in a sunroom, shouting to his two armed goons through a pair of French doors.
Check the grounds. The shape he's in, you can't get him far.
Back to scene on Bruce.
He turns to his main control panel, reaches for a switch, and waits.
External Wayne Manor that moment night.
The two goons outside, with guns and flashlights, roaming cautiously around the grounds. They turn suddenly as a corrugated steel security panel slam into place over the ground floor door and window in Wayne Manor.
Internal sunroom that moment.
The Penguin sees the same thing happening only from inside. He listens helplessly as his goons pound on the steel panels from outside. It's just occurred to him that he's trapped in here.
Internal Batcave a moment later.
Dick is up on a catwalk leading back to the library of Wayne Manor. Bruce shouts up to him from the control console down below.
As soon as he gets to the east wing, wait for my signal. You know what to do.
Dick nods yes and bolts off.
Internal front parlor a moment later.
Vicki and Alfred are still sitting at gunpoint. With all the commotion going on around them, Frack is getting itchy fingers. Suddenly, the stereo begins blaring at top volume. Santa, bring my baby back to me. Frick turns and stares at it in confusion, goes over to fiddle with the controls, and suddenly Bruce Wayne's voice is coming through the loudspeakers.
Vicki, run! Now!
She's off the sofa like a shot, diving for the entry hall. Frick turns and takes aim, but before he can squeeze the trigger, Dick comes out of nowhere to high kick him in the face. The shot goes wild, and the two of them tumble into the Christmas tree, knocking it over. Vicki hits the floor of the entry hall. Huge oaken sliding doors are already slamming shut behind her. The same thing is happening all down the hall of the east wing of the house is sealing itself off. Dick cartwheels across the carpet, catching Frick high on the chest and ramming him backward into the hearth. Before Frick can regain his balance, Dick's beamed him across the back of the skull with a fireplace poker. He bends and picks up Frick's gun and tosses it to Alfred, who's been watching all this with some fascination from the sofa.
Here. You might need it.
Thank you, Master Dick, and bravo.
Internal kitchen that moment.
Vicki has made it to the wall phone. She just can't seem to get a dial tone.
Do you really think we're that stupid?
Vicki turns and realizes to her horror that the voice is Selina's.
I taw, putty tat.
With that, she raises her hand and her claws pop out. Vicki turns and grabs a carving knife from a wooden block, but before she can do anything with it, a whip cracks around her wrist, jerking the knife loose. Selina tugs on the other end, reeling her closer.
You know, I've got a great recipe for sliced bitch.
Vicki lunges forward suddenly, causing the whip to slacken and throwing Selina off balance into the center island. While they tangle up, Vicki grabs a meat cleaver and tries to bring it down on Selina, but Selina rolls effortlessly out the way and returns the favour, swiping at Vicki with her claws. Vicki brings up a skillet just enough time to block a blow. Clang! Vicki sweeps her arm across the countertop, showering Selina with knives and appliances. It buys her enough time to make for the door, but Selina comes flying after her. Another down swipe with the claws, but Vicki shoves a butcher's block into Selina's path, and her talons wedge a half-inch deep into the wood. Vicki rushes out while she's trying to pry herself loose.
Internal dining hall a moment later.
Selina enters, but finds no trace of Vicki.
I love a good old-fashioned cafe. But this is pissing me off.
Vicki charges out from behind the sideboard, pushing a wheeled cocktail cart before her. It slams with full force into Selina, who lands on her back on a great long dining table. Vicki's in the doorway to the entry hall by the time she gets up.
Internal entry hall stairway a moment later.
Vicki races up the stairs. She has a good lead, but Selina makes up the difference in a hurry. She takes the stairway in 3 giant bounds, reaches the landing just as Vicki ducks down the hall and into a bedroom, slamming the door behind her and locking it.
Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty.
She kicks the door open.
Internal bedroom that moment.
Selina enters and strikes a coy pose as she shuts the door behind her. Vicki has opened a pair of French doors leading to the balcony, but it's too long a drop. She stands there paralyzed as Selina advances.
So this is where you earn your keep.
She grabs Vicki, holds her arm out at length, and shoves her roughly back onto the bed. Vicki flails wildly as Selina kneels atop of her. Selina's claws shred Vicki's brows, revealing a frilly section of bra.
Frederick's of Gotham?
She plants a talon against Vicki's sternum and rakes it downward, drawing a red stripe on the exposed flesh of Vicki's belly. Now Vicki just loses it. She begins to shriek uncontrollably.
Not so loud, honey. The neighbors will get the wrong idea. Santa's coming. Time for all good girls to go to sleep.
She raises her claw hand and prepares to slash down at Vicki's neck. But an instant before she can strike, Vicki goes wide-eyed and shuts up. A black shadow falls across the moonlit bed. Selina tenses as a black-gloved hand grabs a fistful of her hair.
Miss me, Angel?
He yanks her body off the bed. Before she knows what's happening, he delivers a powerhouse uppercut. She flies into the door and knocks it cleanly off its hinges.
Internal hallway staircase a moment later.
Batman steps out after Selina, who's only now just picking herself up.
Okay, let's do it, huh? You and me, all the way this time.
She hisses and jumps him. They grapple, a quick flurry of fists, and he knocks her ass over a tea kettle down the long stairway. She gets to her feet, limping, and darts around the corner. Batman marches impeccably down the stairs, taking his time.
Internal hallway a moment later.
Vicki rushes out of the bedroom. She looks down the hall and sees Frack flying out of the guest room, upside down, slamming into the wall opposite. He slumps onto the carpet, out cold. A moment later, Dick strolls out. Vicki rushes to his side.
Come on, we'll be safe in the cave.
Internal hallway a moment later.
Batman pauses outside the door to the armory, which is slightly ajar. He pushes it in cautiously, and a halberd smashes through the wood frame, slicing down mere inches from his face. It's the Penguin wielding an axe. He backs off in seeming terror as Batman advances on him. But then Selina springs down from a perch above the door, landing on his back, and the two of them are going at it again. It's a room full of exotic weaponry, and most of it gets a good workout in the next 30 seconds. Batman dodges a lance, which embeds itself into the wall behind him, quivering. He then swings a mace squarely into Selina's ribs. It's a crippling blow. She flies backwards, knocking over a suit of exotic armor, which topples, knocking over another and another, until various suits of armor all have fallen over domino style, the last one landing squarely atop of the cowering Penguin. Selina is badly hurt now. She makes it out of the rear door to the armory. Batman pauses to check on the Penguin. He seems to be out for the count, and sets off in pursuit of Selina. Several moments pass before the groaning Penguin comes around, enough to dig himself out.
Internal hallway a moment later.
As the Penguin stumbles around the corner, he peers into the library. Vicki is crouched by Bruce's desk, reaching into the bottom drawer. A hidden panel in the bookcase pops open.
Internal library that moment.
As she helps Alfred into the secret passageway, Vicki turns to Dick.
Come on, come with us.
No, I can still help.
Internal hallway a moment later.
The Penguin flattens against the wall as Dick sprints out of the library and heads off in the opposite direction. There's a flabbergasted look on his face as he recognizes the kid.
Wipe 2. Internal Batcave a minute later.
At the monitor bank, watching Batman's pursuit of Selina, are Vicki and Alfred. They pivot suddenly at the sound of
such primitive entertainment.
He's holding the gun on two of them. He stares about delightedly, taking in the prehistoric splendor of the cave. His eyes light up at the sight of the Batmobile, parked on its little plateau.
So Bruce equals Batman? It seems I've discovered two treasures. Don't move. I'd be happy to shoot the boat here.
He pulls out of his pocket some photos and begins to scan the cave. Spots the distinctive rock formation in the upper vault of the cavern. It's a couple of plateaus over. A long, narrow catwalk runs past it, some 10 or 12 feet below.
The Gotham City treasury is about to be stolen twice.
Don't be absurd. You'll never be able to get it out of here.
Oh, I'll manage somehow. You two are my guarantee of that. Let's have a look. Shall we? You go first.
He shoves her. She starts to walk across the catwalk, his gun at her head.
Internal upstairs hallway that moment.
Selina's made it back upstairs, but she's moving at quarter speed, favouring one leg and clutching her ribs as she lops her way down the hallway. She's just past the balcony overlooking the entry hall when Batman appears dead ahead in her path. He's ready to rumble, but instead of responding, she packs it in. She stops, slumps against the wall, and begins to laugh.
It could have been so nice. You and me. If only you weren't so screwed up.
It's over. I don't want to hurt you anymore.
Tell me something. One thing. If you don't enjoy all this, why do you do it?
He just looks at her. He doesn't have an especially good answer. She sighs.
I'll never understand men.
She spins suddenly, delivering a high kick to Batman's throat. As he reels backwards into a wall, she leaps up onto the narrow banister railing some 30 feet above the entry hall floor and goes into a crouch, preparing to spring at an enormous crystal chandelier mounted to the ceiling. But just as she launches off, Batman rolls and brings up the gun from his belt. He fires a razor-sharp disc, which sails past her head, cleanly slicing through the chain, which suspends the chandelier. The chandelier falls just as Catwoman catches hold of it, and she finds herself plummeting to the floor of the entry hall. On impact, the chandelier explodes into 1,000 fragments. The Catwoman lands hard on her back and lies sprawled in the midst of the wreckage, unmoving. Batman advances slowly down the stairs. Her arms and legs jut out at unnatural angles. She lets out an eerie, whimpering yowl of pain. He stands over her. She glares up at him.
9 lives.
I can't move. I can't move.
Her face is cut and bleeding. She tries to lift an arm and can't quite manage it. He crouches down beside her, still cautious.
Don't look at me. Do me, baby. Do me now. That's what I want. Please.
Batman looks up. Dick is standing on the balcony overlooking them, highly curious as to what he'll do.
No.
Batman slowly rises to his feet. She lets out another gruesome whine.
Come on. Don't stop now. Finish me off. Son of a bitch. You're all alike.
Her steel claws snick into place. With an agonizing effort, she lifts her forearms and bends her wrist. She's trying to slit her own throat. He reaches for his belt, extracts a glassine capsule and breaks it open with his thumb. He drops it amid the shattered glass around her face. A tiny cloud of green gas plumes out, and her hands fall limply at her side as she lapses into unconsciousness. Batman stands over her for a minute as Dick marches down to join him.
You should have done it, man. You should have killed her.
Batman gives him a long, hard look, but says nothing.
There's a radio in the cave. We'll send for help.
Internal Batcave a moment later.
The Penguin and Vicki are on the catwalk just below the rock formation. A stone outcropping extends towards the catwalk, and he forces her to jump for it. Now he has to follow. The prospect makes him nervous, but it's a short hop and he clears it okay, finding his footing on the rocky slope. They're cautiously making their way towards the rock formation when Batman suddenly appears at the far end of the catwalk, sizes up the situation and freezes in his track.
Ah, the illustrious Mr. Wayne. Look at you now. Whatever would your friends say? You've been exceptionally congeal host, but I must ask you to back off.
The Penguin grabs hold of Vicki and holds her close as they climb the last few feet towards the grotto. Batman swings his cape around, concealing his hands from view. He takes a cautious step backwards.
Close up Batman's hand.
His free hand closes around a batarang, flicks it open.
Angle on rocks Penguin and Vicki.
They pulled almost even with the rock formation. A large dank grotto is visible through a small gap in the rocks.
No sudden moves. It's a long way down.
Gun at her head, he peers into the grotto.
His POV inside the grotto.
A vast fortune in gold and silver bullion, undisturbed in all these years. Glinting in the darkness, hanging upside down above it like silent guardians, are bats, dozens of them, their tiny wet red eyes glimmering at the Penguin. He dislodges a rock. It tumbles into the grotto, and a startled bat comes screeching out of the gap in the rocks, flying directly at his face.
Angle on rocks Penguin and Vicki.
He backs away in horror as the bat streaks past him. He fires his gun wildly. The sound of it rouses more bats, and they come flying out of the hole. A vast, chittering swarm. Vicki shrieks, the Penguin stumbles, and the two of them fall back onto the rocks, hanging on for dear life.
Vicki!
An instant later, Batman lets fly with the batarang. Clean hit. The Penguin staggers back, and his gun skitters down across the rock. With bats screaming all around her, Vicki takes a deep breath and vaults towards the catwalk. She's a foot short. She grabs hold of the railing and hangs there, over the abyss, trying to pull herself up. Batman races towards her, but the Penguin, clambering down across the rock's outcropping, has managed to grab hold of his gun. The bats have begun to swirl up and towards the higher recesses of the cavern, and he's able to draw a clean bead on Batman. Thunderous echoes reverberate throughout the cave as the first shot strikes Batman and knocks him backwards. As the second spins him around, the third sends him toppling over the railing. Vicki screams. Batman manages to grab the rail with one hand. Now two of them are hanging from the catwalk, sitting ducks, and the Penguin is determined to empty the clip. The echoes ring through. Ancient stalactites drop from the vaulted roof of the cavern, plummeting downward like deadly projectiles, shattering against the cave floor, and then Batman pulls a tiny device from his utility belt and flings it. It lands in the rocks at the Penguin's feet. He stares down at it, and 2 beats later it begins to emit an eerie electronic whine. Within moments, every bat in the cave is in a frenzy, homing in on the signal. The Penguin looks up and sees them coming. A choked wail emits from his throat as he drops the gun and stands there, paralysed. He's just been beaten at his own game. He lets out the last awful howl as hundreds of bats engulf him and he plunges down into the pit, his hideous scream dwindling into a faint echo and then vanishing altogether. Batman manages to drag himself up to the catwalk. He rushes over to Vicki, pulls her up, drapes his cape around her protectively. Gradually, as the bats recede to their distant perches, he stands and helps Vicki to her feet. They embrace on the edge of the abyss. On the far plateau, Dick has hooked up with Alfred. The butler is slumped against a lab table, weary and exhausted. Clutching his wounded arm, Dick slings an arm around him and helps him to the stairway.
Cut to External Wayne Manor night.
Squad cars everywhere. Frick and Frack emerge in handcuffs, flanked by cops. Paramedics carry the still unconscious Selina past on a stretcher and load her into the back of an ambulance.
Internal Wayne Manor entry hall night.
The place is an utter mess. Amid the carnage we find Bruce conferring with Commissioner Gordon and Lieutenant Bullock. In the background, a police doctor is dressing Alfred's gunshot wound.
And then Batman showed up?
He saved all our lives, Jim. I can't say for sure, but I'd bet she's the one behind the murders.
God. I pray you're right. One thing before we go, Bruce. Who's the kid?
Bruce looks into the front parlour, where Vicki and Dick are writing the fallen Christmas tree.
Oh, that's Vicky's little cousin. He's in town for the holidays.
Well, he picked a hell of a time to visit. Merry Christmas, Bruce. Good luck cleaning this place up.
Gordon and Bullock file out, followed by the police doctor. Bruce smiles wearily to himself and strolls into the front parlour.
Internal front parlour night.
Alfred loads Silent Night onto the CD. Vicki ambles up to Bruce.
What are you going to do with all of that gold?
I don't know. Might be a good start on a place to live. For some people who don't have one.
She hugs him. Dick plugs in the Christmas tree lights. They blink to life just as the grandfather clock strikes 12.
It's Christmas.
Yeah. Maybe you should open your presents.
He runs a hand along his cheek and laughs softly.
Oh, Bruce, presents doesn't matter. None of it matters. We're all safe. We're together.
Might as well.
He digs around in his jacket pocket and produces a tiny gift box, which he hands to Vicki. She unwraps it, opens it slowly, and sees a diamond ring inside. She gazes up at him, speechless. He gazes back. You see the whole of the devastated room and all the people in it. Vicki falling into Bruce's arms, Dick off to one side watching them, Alfred tossing broken furniture into a roaring fireplace. And on the image of this decidedly eccentric family unit, we fade out. The end.
About everything, talk about what we're feeling. 'Cause lately, baby, I don't really understand what is going on, what's going through your head. We used to kiss goodbye in the morning time, and no matter what, it was always right. You'd hold my hand, walk down to town, talk all day without making a sound, making love to the morning light, going straight to work, never being tired. Tell me, baby, what happened to all that? Always right, you hold my